The rain was relentless, mirroring the storm brewing inside me. Alistair, a 43-year-old IT specialist in Manchester, had always prided myself on my stability, my predictability. My life with Bronwyn, my wife of 15 years, was a carefully constructed edifice of shared routines, comfortable silences, and unwavering trust. Or so I thought. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Bronwyn, a vibrant and outgoing primary school teacher, began spending more time at school, citing extra meetings and curriculum updates. Her phone, usually an open book, became guarded, always face down, always password protected. Our evenings, once filled with easy conversation and shared laughter, were now punctuated by her distracted scrolling and curt replies. I chalked it up to stress, to the demands of her job, to the inevitable ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. Then came the weekends. Bronwyn, who had always cherished our Saturday morning trips to the farmer's market and Sunday afternoon walks in Heaton Park, started making excuses. "I need some time to myself, Alistair," she'd say, her eyes avoiding mine. "I'm feeling suffocated." Ever the understanding husband, would retreat, giving her the space she claimed to need, oblivious to the gaping void that was growing between us. The first real crack appeared on a Tuesday. I'd finished work early and decided to surprise Bronwyn with a romantic dinner. I picked up her favorite flowers, lilies, and a bottle of chilled Sauvignon Blanc. When I arrived at our house in Didsbury, the living room was dark, the air thick with an unfamiliar scent, a musky cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I called out her name, my voice echoing in the silent house. No response. I found her in the bedroom. Not alone. The man was sprawled on our bed, half-dressed, his face buried in Bronwyn's hair. Bronwyn, her eyes wide with panic, scrambled to cover herself. I stood frozen, the flowers and wine slipping from my grasp, shattering on the floor. The man, a younger, fitter version of myself, finally sat up. I recognized him instantly. Gareth, the new PE teacher at Bronwyn's school. He had come to our home multiple times for dinner. "Alistair, it's not what you think," Bronwyn stammered, her voice trembling. "Really?" "Because it looks exactly like what I think," I said, my voice dangerously low. The rage that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted, a volcanic eruption of betrayal and hurt. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to destroy everything in sight, but I couldn't. I was paralyzed, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't escape. Gareth, sensing the shift in power, quickly gathered his clothes and fled, muttering apologies as he stumbled out of the house. I didn't even register his departure. My focus was solely on Bronwyn, on the woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, the woman who had just shattered my world. "How could you?" I whispered, the words barely audible. "How could you do this to us?" Bronwyn started to cry, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know," she sobbed. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened," I repeated, incredulous. "You didn't mean for it to go this far. You were in our bed, Bronwyn, with another man." "How much further did you think it was going to go?" She offered no explanation, no justification, only a torrent of tears and hollow apologies. I couldn't bear to look at her, at the woman who had become a stranger. I turned and walked out of the bedroom, out of the house, out of her life. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of disbelief and grief. I moved into a small flat in Salford Quays, the sterile environment a stark contrast to the warmth and comfort of our family home. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't think straight. The betrayal was a constant, gnawing pain, a wound that refused to heal. I confided in my best friend, Cormac, a gruff but loyal man who had always been fiercely protective of me. Cormac listened patiently, his face growing darker with each detail. "You can't let her get away with this, Alistair," he said, his voice tight with anger. "She needs to face the consequences of her actions." I initially resisted the idea of revenge. It wasn't in my nature. I was a peacemaker, a problem solver, not a vengeful aggressor. But as the days turned into weeks and the pain refused to subside, I started to reconsider. Bronwyn had not only betrayed me, she had humiliated me, she had stolen my peace of mind. And she had shown no remorse, no real understanding of the damage she had caused. I decided to hire a private investigator. I needed to know the full extent of Bronwyn's affair, to understand the depth of her deception. The investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Aoife, quickly uncovered a web of lies and deceit. Bronwyn and Gareth had been seeing each other for months, meeting in secret during school hours, exchanging explicit messages, even planning a weekend getaway to the Lake District. The evidence was damning, irrefutable. I felt a surge of anger, hotter and more intense than anything I had ever experienced. I wanted to expose Bronwyn, to ruin her reputation, to make her suffer the way I was suffering. But I knew that revenge wouldn't bring me happiness, it wouldn't erase the pain. It would only consume me, turning me into someone I didn't want to be. Instead, I decided to focus on myself, on rebuilding my life. I started therapy, talking through my feelings with a compassionate and insightful counselor. I joined a gym, channeling my anger and frustration into physical activity. I reconnected with old friends, rediscovering the joy of companionship and laughter. As I began to heal, I started to see things more clearly. I realized that Bronwyn's affair wasn't a reflection of my worth, but a reflection of her own insecurities and unhappiness. She had made a choice, a selfish and destructive choice, but it was her choice to make. I couldn't control her actions, but I could control my reaction. The divorce was swift and relatively painless. Bronwyn didn't contest the terms, perhaps out of guilt, perhaps out of a desire to move on with Gareth. I didn't care. I was free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal, free to start anew. But the story doesn't end there. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I received a phone call from the head teacher of Bronwyn's school. He informed me that Bronwyn had been suspended, pending an investigation into her relationship with Gareth. Apparently, their affair had become public knowledge, causing a scandal within the school community. Parents were outraged, teachers were disgusted, and Gareth had been promptly dismissed. Bronwyn's life was crumbling around her. She had lost her job, her reputation, and her husband. Gareth, the man for whom she had risked everything, had abandoned her, moving on to another unsuspecting victim. I felt a pang of sympathy for her, a flicker of the love I had once held. But it was fleeting. Bronwyn had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. She had chosen to betray me, to destroy our marriage, and she had to face the consequences of her actions. I learned later that Bronwyn had moved back in with her parents, a broken and defeated woman. She had tried to contact me to apologize, to ask for forgiveness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. The pain was still too raw, the wounds still too deep. I have since moved on with my life. I have a new job, a new home, and a new sense of purpose. I'm still cautious about relationships, still wary of betrayal. But I am also hopeful, open to the possibility of finding love again. I know that I deserve happiness, and I refuse to let Bronwyn's actions define my future. One evening, a year or so after everything had settled, I was at a pub in Castlefield when I saw Gareth. He was alone, nursing a pint, his face etched with regret. I considered approaching him, confronting him, demanding an explanation, but I decided against it. He wasn't worth my time or my energy. He was just a pawn in Bronwyn's game, a casualty of her selfishness. As I walked away, I realized that I had finally found peace. I had forgiven Bronwyn, not for her sake, but for my own. I had released the anger, the resentment, the bitterness that had been poisoning my soul. I was free. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Life has a funny way of working out. A couple of years later, I met Isolde, a talented artist with a kind heart and a quick wit. We fell in love, slowly and cautiously, building a relationship based on trust and respect. We are now married, living in a beautiful cottage in the Peak District, surrounded by love and laughter. Bronwyn's betrayal taught me a valuable lesson, that life is unpredictable, that people are flawed, and that forgiveness is the key to moving on. It also taught me the importance of self-respect, of knowing my worth, and of refusing to settle for anything less than I deserve. I am grateful for the pain, for the heartbreak, for the journey that led me to where I am today. I am stronger, wiser, and more resilient than I ever thought possible, and I am finally truly happy.